Hi, I'm Sume McPhail.
And I'm Isla McPhail.
And we are here with Austin and Amy Smith on the Makeshift Homeschool Podcast to talk about their experience with homeschooling. So can you tell us in your own words why you chose to homeschool your kids?
Okay, there's a couple of factors I think that pushed us to homeschool. First, just as a background, both of us went to public school. Austin was homeschooled for only 1 year, but the rest of his siblings were homeschooled. And I went to traditional public school for my entire 13 years, I guess. And when we were thinking about, I got a background, my background is in education, so when I went to college, I just got really excited about learning new things, and especially learning new things and a whole truth. I felt like sometimes at public school, you weren't allowed to say certain things, you weren't allowed to do certain things, or you had to give certain answers, and college was a lot more open to me. I went to a religious institution, so we were able to talk about God, to talk about universal truth, eternal truth, to talk about principles and character, which was a heightened addition to my learning. So I really wanted that for our children. So when my mother-in-law homeschooled her kids, it was easy to have a mentor, and we just decided that instead of putting them in public school, they were kind of already in a household of learning. We did a lot of learning activities, and we just thought, well, kindergarten, they don't really have to go anyway. And then we just decided, well, for a couple of years, especially they would like to have a foundation at home, especially when they're building those foundations of principles. So we decided, at least for these couple years, and it's kind of evolved since then. I think that the option is still open, and we're kind of open to public school. But I think at this point, we've seen so many benefits to homeschool that it's kind of strengthened that initial decision to homeschool, which started because of that, initially desiring to teach our kids, all truth and to let them discover for themselves. I think also as a teacher, my mom went back to work when I was in middle school, and I hated it. And we're both kind of go-getters. And I knew that if all my kids were in school and I was just kind of at home, that I might be kind of antsy to learn something. So I knew with my background in education that if I put that to my family, I would be continuing to serve my family and spending time with my children and using my talents for that, instead of looking outside my family to serve. As a family, we do that, but as a mom and a person, I really especially wanted in their younger years to be putting all of my time into them and into my family. So I was kind of a little, what's it called?
Nervous?
No, I was not jealous, but I was kind of greedy. As a teacher, I love seeing that aha moment when kids get things and they discover things. And I didn't want to give that, especially for my own children, to somebody else. I wanted to be the one who struggled with them and saw them get it and saw that light come on. Yeah. And so those were the initial reasons to homeschool. It was really to keep myself invested in my family and to make sure my kids were learning whole truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I would boil it all down to just one word. For me, it was flexibility. And that all covers, everything she said covers a lot of what I mean by that. But also, I like having the option to be spontaneous. For example, on Friday at around, lunchtime, my grandfather called me and said, hey, you guys said you'd come over if we wanted to come over, because the whole COVID thing, we didn't want to get anybody sick. And I told them, call me when you're comfortable. And so they called and said, when do you want to come? And I said, what about today? So we hopped in the car Friday night and took off. And that ability to be flexible doesn't always exist when your kids are in public school, because you have a fixed schedule and have to adhere to that. And when they're homeschooled, anything can be an educational experience. So if we decide to go to the mountains or go to the beach or go to a museum or whatever, we can go whenever. And I appreciate that ability.
Mm-hmm. Is there also kind of a factor of flexibility with certain things your kids can learn? And like if they want to learn, if they are more passionate about history, then you guys could go more in depth in history, and the same things for like other subjects. And yeah. Absolutely.
And I think that's why flexibility is kind of that's the buzzword that I would use. Mm-hmm. But there's a good example of that is you've been talking to Cadence about Minecraft. In my opinion, his coding, learning how to code Minecraft and manipulate the game and add elements to the world that weren't there before because he decided he wanted to put them there, that's part of his education. For him, it's fun, it's play, and he's being creative. For me, he's learning to code, and that's something that he can use down the road as a skill. And while the Minecraft coding may not be something that people want to pay for right now, it's a step toward learning a coding language that could be paid for down the road.
Yeah. So what's a common misconception you often hear from parents who don't homeschool?
There's some good ones. I think with COVID-19, I think a lot of people were like, wait, what about all these bad things about homeschool? Probably one of the ones I hear the most often is, but I want my children to be socialized, which is very...
And have social opportunities.
Right, which is not...
Friends.
Homeschool, actually, I feel like homeschool has a better structure to learn socially than a public school. When you go into the workforce, you're not with 20 other kids who are the same age as you, who have the same education as you. You're with varied people. And homeschool children are very often exposed to adults, to other mentors, to children of varying ages. So that's the first thing about, and you can expose to them it goes back to that flexibility. You have the choice for how much you expose them or don't expose them or who you expose them to.
Mm-hmm.
I know
one of my favorite things to do when we're at a museum or something, when my kids ask me a question, I don't have to know the answer. I can point them to the museum guide over there and say, go ask them. Let them tell you about it. Even if I do know an answer, I don't care. I'll still point them because it's an opportunity for them to learn to talk to somebody older than them. And it's fun.
And then like the basic unit of society is the family. So when I have a new baby, and we stop school because I'm not grading school, or we pare down what we're doing for school, my children are getting like a firsthand experience. I can't imagine. I think sometimes how my life would be if my 11 and my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old went to school, but staying home, I almost can't imagine. I think who would help me after I had a baby? Have those older kids, and they're learning about how to care for children and how to
cook a meal,
how to have a
sweep
family,
the floor.
Just life skills. They get a lot of practice in life skills and serving in their family. And I think when you have strong families, you have a strong society.
We had an impromptu lesson the other day on how to defrost a freezer. Because it wasn't freezing. The food was starting to thaw out because it'd frozen so much you couldn't shut the lid. So Cadence and Corey got out the blow dryer and butter knives, and we're chipping away the ice and dried it all out and vacuumed all the water out, and they learned something that's not something you would typically learn at school, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you did, then you'd have to say, okay, now I have to go home and see how I do this in my freezer, and when am I going to need to apply this? And it's readily applicable. And I think life is school and school is life, and so you're applying things right away, and then you're having regular conversations with your children where you can bring in learning, bring in principles that you're trying to teach them. Oh, remember we learned this in
Kate's dog.
In whatever.
That's a great example. I told you about the Minecraft coding class that Cadence is taking. Well, Cadence has diabetes. I don't know if you knew that or not, type 1. And last summer we got him a diabetic alert dog, which is a service animal that can smell when his blood sugar's moving too quickly one way or the other. And not long after he started this coding class, he started referring to the training that the dog had as if-then statements, something that he'd learned in his coding class. He started to apply that coding computer knowledge to a living animal, to a situation that he experiences as a diabetic. And it makes sense to him now because of something else he had learned. And I think that's one of the cool things that you have. I think you have more opportunity to do that in a life school setting when life is school, because everything interconnects, and we're constantly trying to point those things out.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Just butting in. What are your differences on how, like, you think about education, like, or how to educate your kids? Like, what are the differences of how you think about how to educate your kids?
The difference versus like a public school model of thinking?
No, what the differences between each other.
Between each of us?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
You know, I had a friend once tell me that husbands and wives typically have this one difference, and that's that the father typically is thinking long term, and the mom thinks now, right? What are the kids learning right now? And fathers tend to think, well, how is this going to help them in the future? And I've seen that sometimes when they might get stuck with something or frustrated with something, and it's a big deal because right now it's hard and we can't understand it. And I'll think and say, well, he's got 10 years to figure this out. What does he need to know now? And so I think that's one difference sometimes, not necessarily in the way we think about it, but in the way that we apply it.
Yeah.
Or it's a different role that we play. I'm in the thick of what's going on right now, so sometimes it's difficult for me to see outside of that and to have somebody come in and say, think big picture.
Yeah.
So it's important having somebody who can serve both of those roles. I don't know. We've been married for 13 years, so we're pretty like-minded. We just kind of melded. Not really. I mean, I think
she's a professionally trained teacher, so I defer to her wisdom a lot to educating the kids, and I want them to do what they enjoy. I think, and if they can find a way to make money doing it, all the better.
I think there are times when, like, I have an idea of what's going on, or I know what's going on already in the kids' school day and how much the load that they have to carry. And Dad will say, "You need to do this for a school project." And I'm like, "You can't just say that. You can't just add a school project right now." Like, you have to think about everything they're juggling. And I try and, like, okay, how are we going to work this out? You know, I try and not, because I want their dad to be involved in their education. And I think what he does a lot of times is take advantage of those moments and throw in learning opportunities. So sometimes we have, like, little battles over that, who is really the teacher and who is owning their time. And you can see it on the kids' faces. Like I said, we're both go-getters, so they're like, I'm going to do what you want all the time. So I think, sometimes that's a little bit of a battle, but we work it out.
Oh, thanks.
So what advice can you give parents that agree with you but can't afford to homeschool?
Like monetarily can't afford, or time, or?
Well, it's just kind of they aren't able to one way or the other.
One way or another. I've often felt that I recognize homeschooling is not for everyone. There can be financial circumstances that prevent it. if both parents are required to work outside of the home, that can be a strain on the ability to homeschool. Some parents think that they don't know enough to teach their kids at home. I'll address that one first. I think if that's the only thing holding you back, you don't think you know enough.
Or you think that your child doesn't listen to you, so you can't homeschool. That's another common misconception. My child doesn't listen to me. I just can't teach them because they don't listen to me.
Yeah,
that kind of thinking, I'm not capable of doing this as a parent.
Yeah. And I'll keep that separate from I just don't know enough. One of the funnest things for me is when my kids teach me something that they learned studying on their own. And that, if I learned anything from 1 year of being homeschooled as a kid, it was that I didn't necessarily need a teacher 95+% of the time because I figured it out. There were resources that I could turn to on my own, and I could read a book. I could find a text. I could read a textbook. In fact, I mean, when you go to college, that's the first thing they tell you to do is read chapter 1. And I learned that year how to teach myself. And that made every year after that in public school a piece of cake. I literally asked to sleep in math class because it was so I could teach it to myself in 15 minutes what took 45 minutes of lecture. And that was my break time because I had learned how to teach myself. And so for those parents who think, I can't do this because I can't teach my kids, you don't need to teach them. You just have to teach them how to learn. If they can read build an environment where they're able to teach themselves. Your first month or two is going to be a little rough, but the longer you do it, the easier it will get. And then your kids will be teaching you. And there's nothing wrong with your kid coming and asking a question and you saying, I don't know, let's look it up together.
Actually, there's something very right about that. They learn that it's not this expert teaching me something. I always have to have an expert teaching me. And there's a place for mentors. Yeah. But I don't always have to have an expert telling me what to think. They learn that adults are still learning, growing people. And that's the stage for lifelong learning. Yeah. So,
can I make a comment on that?
Yeah. There's only like 9 minutes left before the Zoom meeting closes, so we can start up a new one and you guys can join again, or because we do still have some questions. So.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Can I just comment on like the answers to that question that Summer just gave?
Yeah.
Like most of the kids in my class, not to name any names, but some of them, they feel like their parent is this expert and they know everything, and I just feel like I don't want the people in my class to feel like their parents are experts at everything and they know everything, because nobody knows everything. In fact, no one is ever really any close. Like you're always learning something new, and you can never stop learning no matter how much you know.
Sure. I think, so true. And they may be sorting that as this is an older, wiser person, so if they told me it must be true, as a way to like back up what they're saying. You know, my research is from someone who is an expert. If somebody said, you know, I talked to Amy Smith about this thing in music education or choral education, it kind of gives what they're saying a little bit more value because I have a background in education in that. So that's probably where they're using that. But you're right. I think a lot of times it's a harder to be meek and to say or to have a difference of opinion and not have to. When you cite a source when somebody else disagrees with you or has a different opinion, to realize that even two experts in a field can have completely different and experiences. So you're right about that.
Yeah.
And I want to finish answering the other piece of that question, Sumay. Mm-hmm. As far as affording it, whether it's time or monetarily, it's not possible for a family. They can still bring elements of homeschooling into their home. There's going to be some opportunity in the house for family time. There's some opportunity. The kids have time for homework. You can still take that idea of learning what you're passionate about, or we call them wonders. The kids have little notebooks. I wonder about whatever. And those are things that we can look up together, or that they can they can choose to watch a documentary about or read a book about. You can still, all that is something that you can do, even if you can't afford the time or the cost of bringing your kids home 24/7.
Yeah, this idea actually came from a professor of mine whose children were homeschooled, or were public schooled, and his daughter was board in school. So they asked permission for the teacher if she could bring a notebook with, called her I Wonder
It would
book.
have kept me out of a lot of trouble.
And when she had further questions about things, or she was finished with school early, she would write down things she wondered about that she could look up later with her parents, or she could bring books to work on at school when she was already finished with her schoolwork. So it was a way for her to push herself. I think a lot of times in public school, we expect the children to be put in an advanced class. We expect them to be put in a gifted class. We expect them to, be teaching other kids, or sometimes they just end up being the teacher's helper because they know so much. But children can be, even in public school, with cooperation from the teachers, part of their own learning and push themselves further. So I liked this idea of an I Wonder book, but some other ideas, and we've incorporated that into our homeschool. There are some other ideas of public school parents that we've talked to is there are parents who teach their kids only during the summer months. They have a schedule during the summer months. They may require them an hour of study, or they may, I knew one mom who did the core knowledge curriculum with her kids to kind of supplement what they were doing in public school during the summer. So the summer is a great time for parents. In fact, hearing everybody have like a structured, we're doing this on Monday and this on whatever, and I'm like, you're all just homeschooling in the summer. That's what you're doing. And during the summer, we're like, let's go to the pool. It's our checkout, because all the rest of the year we're learning. We still learn in different ways in the summer, but
learning to swim is part of school.
Yes, learning to swim is part of school. So I think also being an involved parent is really important. Know what your children are learning at school. Make opportunities to talk to them about what they're learning, to discuss with them, to bring out those I wonders that you can research with them. I think those are all important parts of just being an active parent, and I feel like that was one reason that our public school experience was as positive as it was, because our parents were involved in our learning and in our lives and what we were interested in, even when we were going to public school doing, and if we need to take a break, because learning should never be something that's stressful. It should never be something that's so overwhelming. But there are those moments where school's hard for them, and I think you actually learn more as a parent about your child being with them, trying to teach them. You learn, you see it like every pregnancy is kind of different, so you kind of get a feel for who this kid is, and you watch them learn and grow. Our third child was the last one to walk. He didn't walk till 14 months, but when he walked, he didn't make a mistake, and he's still like that. And I can use what I know as a parent to help him in school. It doesn't have to be this parent and teacher going back and forth. Sometimes it's parent and parent, and I'm saying, this kid is more like you, and I don't really understand what's going on, so can you help me, please? Or be calling my mother-in-law, you raised my husband, how do I raise this child? But I think, going back to that, just as you get to know your child better and on a better level being their parent, and that's helpful in both kind of ways. It's helpful to be their teacher. It helps you teach them better, but it also helps you parent and love them better. And so actually that's been a bonus to homeschool that I didn't know I was going to have. I look forward to that aha moment, but just understanding them as a person better because I have to be their teacher has been a blessing. So I think there is a point when parents, and then there's also like the stress of being with your children all the time and finding time for yourself, finding time to connect with just yourself or a higher power, or time to de-stress, time to think where it's quiet. When you have 3 and 4 and 5 kids, those times get like fewer and farther between. So that is sometimes seen as a negative to homeschool also. Well, I would never have time for myself. And I would say that giving to my children gives back to me. And like I've said, learning with my children gives back to me. But I do have to be real with myself and say there are times that I need just time for me. But I think that's also a teaching opportunity for my children, that they see I'm not available for you as a person 100% of the time. Who in a relationship is? You need time for yourself. You need time to disconnect. And I find when I need that, they usually need it also. So they get to go to their rooms and have their own private time and I get to have my own time, and I say, we're going to spend this long, and then we'll get back together. And so that's a real life situation, and I think I love that homeschool can provide those situations. I think even summer at home can provide those situations. And you have to ask yourself when you're deciding to homeschool or not, there's like lots of pros and cons, and you just have to, any schooling, because there's a big spectrum now. It used to be like, this is public school, maybe here's private school, and here's homeschool. And there are all these buckets, but you can do public school at home. You can make your public school experience a little bit more customized. There's charter schools and private schools and Wonder Books or summer or whatever, dual credit programs. So I think there's a big range of flexibility in schooling, whether you're mostly homeschooled or mostly public schooled, and using that to your advantage really helps families be successful, I think.
Mm-hmm. I really like what you said about how learning should like never be stressful and stuff. And I just came up with this question, but what would you recommend anything to parents to try to help their children not be as stressed out about, maybe they're like stressed out at school with different things, like they're stressed out about homework, or they feel like they have to get a really good grade on a certain test. What would you recommend for parents to try to help their children if they don't have the time to homeschool?
Anybody answer that?
That's a good question, and I think the answer, the right answer, would depend on each unique situation, right? The personality of the children, the dynamics of the home, and I think it would be different for each kid. My oldest son, if he's stressed about homework, I need to give him a break. He has to step away from it and come back to it another time. If he gets behind on schoolwork, I can't expect him to catch up in 2 days, because that makes him more stressed. I can't expect him to go nonstop all day, because that makes him more stressed. My second child, he prefers to knock it out and be done and have something fun to look forward to. So just those two kids. The first one, I would have to say, well, hey, why don't we plan to play a game this afternoon? You work on it for an hour this morning, and then we'll play a game, and then you can pick it up again tomorrow, and we'll play a game. Right? I can do that for him. My second son, I could just say, hey, if you're done by Wednesday, we'll go fishing, and he'll get it all done. And so it comes to knowing the specific personality of the child and what do they need. I was that way. When I got stressed in school, I had different levels of stress. There was I'm stressed, so I don't want to even think about this project that's hanging in my head. I'm going to go play basketball. I'm going to go out with my friends. I'm going to go on a date. I'm going to do something that takes my mind off of it. I'll come back to it later. Then there was a level of stress of nobody can talk to me right now because I got to get this done. And where I was at just depended. So if you have a kid that's at school, he's stressed because he's not getting good grades, what are the typical things that they do to relax and balance that against the need that there's a very real deadline, and they've got to learn that. But that is the homeschool opportunity, learning how to handle this. You're teaching them how to deal with stress in a healthy way. It doesn't have anything to do with math. It doesn't have anything to do with science or English, whatever it is that they're learning in school that's causing the stress. That's the stressor. You're being asked to teach them how to manage stress. So as a parent, the first thing I would say, share with your child how you've managed stress.
And try to help them decompress.
Yeah, help them find what works for them, because that's the tool they need. They need to know how to relieve stress in a healthy way. Because the last thing you want them to do is to blow it off completely. That's not a healthy way to handle stress. Spiraling is something that we've had to help one of our children learn how to not do, because one little thing, all of a sudden the world's coming to an end, and that's not a healthy way to handle stress either. We find those things like for him, it was, let's go back to what is real. And he has to list things that are, this is real, this is real, this is real, meaning in this complex situation that I'm blowing out of proportion, let's boil it down to this is the problem. And identifying that's a relief of stress for him. So that's what I come back to, is recognize what it is that as a parent that you're really being asked to teach your child in that situation. And that is, how do I deal with stress?
Okay, so
can I actually ask another question?
You bet.
Do you have any advice for me and Sume about like the education, or how to like improve different, like how to improve our learning?
Improve learning.
I think that this is specific to the context of, like, we have 3 months where we have an incredible amount of freedom before the new school year starts. And so we'll edit me out of it. But that was when I disappeared for a second, I wanted Isla to talk about this, because you guys have a lot more experience with this than we do. And so maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on how we could try to make the most of this opportunity.
I think just really quick, so I feel the same way about my summer. I have things I want the children to accomplish during the school year, and I only have so long as a summer to grow just as me. Not worrying about the kids learning along with me or learning along with them, not worrying about teaching them something or facilitating or mentoring something, which takes up, with 4 kids in school now and expecting a baby and a toddler, it takes up all of my time. So I feel I have felt stressed about just really wanting to make the most of this time. And I had to remind myself that this lasts my whole life. So what I've been learning this summer is actually interior design. I've always wanted to know more about interior design. So I've been like crash coursing lots of things, trying to get everything as fast as I can, then feeling stressed about all the decisions I want to make because all the things, and then I came back to, wait a minute, why are you learning this? Because you love to learn it. And when you get to the point where you're trying to take it in so fast or so much, it feels stressful, that's a barometer for me to say, you need to take a step back and remember that you enjoy learning this. This is something that you wanted to do. So if it gets past the point of enjoyment to a point of stress, I would say that's a key indicator for you that you need to back off a little bit. It should be enjoyable. You push yourself, you have goals and things, but everybody only has so much time, and you only have 3 months. It's okay. You don't actually only have 3 months. You have weekends, you have vacations, you have, when you're sitting bored in school, to write down different ideas about what you want to do with Makeshift Homeschool. This will continue because it's become already a part of who you are. So even though I'm going to have a baby, it seems like life is going to stop, because it really will. All I'll be doing is that baby for the first couple of months. Life will continue. It's only a season of time. So if I decide to pick it back up, or if I decide to hire somebody and just know more about it, then that's what I'm going to do. But I don't want it to diminish my learning time, my growth as a person, because I'm putting a lot of expectations on myself, if that makes sense.
So Isla, one thing I think I want to talk about, and it's something like I've led some youth organizations before, and I try to get all of them to do it. And it's part of this idea of learning to learn. Mm-hmm. So if I were to say you've got 3 months to improve your ability to learn at home, what should I do? I would say try to make everything you do a learning opportunity. And the way, a tool that I give these kids to do that is called a reflection. When you're done playing with your friends for 3 hours outside in the backyard, take 5 minutes to reflect on everything that you did. What was something you noticed? What did you observe while you were playing? What were the social dynamics? Somebody got hurt. What caused that to happen? And this one thing that we did was just awesome. What made it so awesome? And reflect on that and see what you can learn from there. I've seen some of your your blogs, and there's psychology, and there's what are some others? Starts with another P word. I can't remember off the top of my head. You're learning about a lot of different things, and you will start to see principles show up in economics that will show up in interpersonal dynamics with you and your friends, and the games that you make up, and the imaginations that you use, and the creativity, and the hard work, and the physical exertion. These things recur throughout everything that we do in life.
Yeah.
We take time to reflect in anything that we do, we can learn doing anything. Anything can be a learning opportunity.
Yeah. That's very good advice for me. I feel like that'll be very helpful for me.
Watching a movie, the Onward post that you all did was like, I wish I watched more. I'm now going to watch movies in a different way.
Yeah.
I thought it's so cool that turned into a social learning thing for not just you, but for me, my kids, other kids your own age. I mean, just anything can become an opportunity to learn something.
Yeah.
I think another thing to remember, just extending kind of what I was talking about before, learning happens over and over again. It's an eternal, like, you just keep going around. It's kind of like a screw that like slowly goes around, but it doesn't quite come back to the same place. It's scrolling up the entire time. So when I was in public school, I was learning about biology and I was learning about botany, and I don't remember a lot of that stuff. All the details, I'm kind of like, I'd taken a bunch of learning and I remember the point I come to, and then I forget all the things before. That's just kind of how my brain thinks. So I have to revisit some of those details. And when I have taught my children, I think teaching them, but also being an adult, having more life experience, I come to a higher knowledge of the same kind of learning. I just visited anatomy and physiology again with my children. And some of these subjects you'll visit over and over again in your life, and you have to know that each time you visit them, you're going to learn those true principles. You're going to come back to it, and you're going to learn it better. And that's how expertise is acquired, is by going back over and over again. I had a professor in college that said, I don't think we should give anyone a bachelor's degree. We're just going to just give it to them because they completed classes. I think they should come in and have an exit interview. And when we say, what did you learn? And they say, I learned that I don't know anything. Then we would give them their degree. Because you learn so much about like the base level of your degree, and you get out into the field and you're like, wow, there's so much more to learn about this. I'm definitely not an expert just because I've just begun. And so that's where you're at in a lot of these different subjects. It's great you're exploring so many different things. It will help you connect to different people. It will help you find what you're passionate about. And when you do find that thing that you really want to delve into, that you really want to become an expert in, that will teach you in a different way how to learn and keep learning and keep pulling out those true principles in that eternal round that we just keep continuing to spiral up and progress.
Yeah, I also noticed that like when you keep like when the screw keeps turning and turning, your example for that, I also realized that every time you look back to it, every time you come back to it, you actually learn some new details, that you find. Sometimes they find helpful for me, sometimes they don't. Yeah. But you learn something new every time.
Exactly. I feel like one of the best examples for me, just as a mother, has been like each child that I had a pregnancy with. Every single one I learned a little more, and I was a little better, and things went a little bit better with the pregnancy or the birth or whatever. And every time I feel like, why do I have to do this again? There's this point where I'm like, again, I'm learning this again. I don't want to learn this. I don't want to go through this. And that's just life. Life is like that. Have you ever been sick? You got the flu and you're like, why am I getting the flu again? We're going to keep experiencing those same things again, so we can practice the character that we want to build. We can practice those true principles, and that's how we learn, just by different experiences, but at the same time by having varied experiences, but at the same time having similar experiences where we can refine the process and become an expert.
Yeah.
For the 2-year-old.
There's your random kid.
Yeah.
I think they're cleaning up. He's actually putting something away. Putting something away.
Okay. So, how do you accommodate unique strengths and interests of your kids into your homeschooling?
This is fun. When you have more kids, it's really fun. You just feel like there's always a ball dropping, right? You're just juggling. It is a juggle. I think the more children that you have, it becomes a juggle.
Yeah. One of the things that, again, it kind of comes back to something that I learned, I think, because I had a year of homeschool as a kid. And that is that it's easier for me to learn something if I either know I have to teach it to somebody or if I just take the time to teach it. I did that through my master's program. I told them in my entrance interview, they asked me how am I going to succeed in the program with how much I was working. I was working 50 hours a week and wanting to go to school for another 10. And I told them, easy, I'm going to teach my other classmates the material. That's how I will learn it. And so with homeschool, especially with a larger family, we can let the older kids teach the younger kids. And if the younger kids pick something up, they can teach the older kids. And I just saw that in a simple non-school setting this weekend when the youngest one that you just saw run through here was helping his sister learn something at the beach that she hadn't seen yet. And she's the next one just older than him. So that's one of the fun things that can happen as each child has a different strength or a different interest than the other, is they can then share those interests with the other kids. Our oldest is focused on Minecraft, loves Minecraft. The other kids are interested in Minecraft because of him, but none of them want to take programming. But they're still learning it because of what he's doing. And another son absolutely loves sushi. And now all of a sudden the other kids want to learn more about sushi because he loves sushi. And again, I'm using non-educational examples, but the same thing would apply. Somebody's interested in math, somebody's interested in history. In the shows that they pick, one has an interest in animals, they're going to watch a show on animals, and the other kids are going to watch it. And somebody has an interest in planets and stars and asteroids. And those strengths help everybody learn a little bit about what the one person has a strength in. But that learning for everybody else strengthens that other person that much more. And it's just this interwoven helping each other rise that is just such a cool thing about learning as a family and being homeschooled.
That's a really great way to put it. I think an interesting dynamic happened in our family when our oldest was 5. He went to an orchestra concert and he just fell in love with the violin. And I had some previous experience with the violin when I was in elementary and middle school, but my degree focused more on choral education, on vocal. So, I know the basics behind music, and I remember learning basic violin and viola, but I felt like I was relearning it again with him. He really wanted to take violin. So he started taking violin lessons from an amazing mentor, and all the other children wanted to start learning. And this mentor has taught a lot to our family besides violin, but he never turned a child away. And I think that was important. At first it was supporting cadence because he is very musical and it's his naturally given talent to hear and be able to play things back. Melodies and harmonies, they come easily to him. And so at first it was like, okay, this is his interest. Let's encourage him. The second child wanted to do violin also. And I'm like, you know what? You're really not as interested in music as cadence. You really like sports. Let's explore that avenue. And you don't have to be upset that cadence is doing violin and you're doing sports. But then this interesting thing happened. The third child, who's showing up right here, the third child started playing because he was really interested. And the fourth child was 18 months. Okay, thank you. I'll be there in a minute. The fourth child was only 18 months and she wanted to start doing it. And I was like, I can't really hold back the second child from wanting to do this. So they both play the violin. In fact, they're both learning the piano now also. All of our children, minus the youngest right now, play the violin. And it's interesting to see their unique talents come out in one thing. We think that this kid really likes sports, or he's physical, and this child really likes music. But the truth is, they can both do music. They both have an environment. They both excel at different things in music, and they help each other. One, Cadence is really good when they play Legos. He's really good at following the directions. He wants to build it exactly like it is. And Corey can see a picture or kind of make something up, and he comes up with this amazing structure in Legos, and I'm like, how did you do that? And he says, oh no, it just came to me. So they do approach things differently. They have their own different ways of learning and talents, but that doesn't mean that one child only does music. That doesn't mean one child, we're a musical family. So it's fun to watch in one avenue the children have different skills come out when you let that happen. So there's an element of supporting each other. There's also an element of supporting each other in individual talents.
And learning from each other.
Yeah, it crosses subjects. It doesn't have to be like this child is only interested in this and this is only their thing. It can be our family thing. They can bring their own unique gifts to it.
Awesome.
I'm just making this question right on the spot.
You're really good at it.
Like, what if a kid, this is relating to what you said with the musical instruments, but what if a kid doesn't want the other kid playing the same instrument as them?
I think I can't really keep my kids from doing separate things. If the oldest is interested in Legos, then they're all liking Legos. If the third child wants to like sushi, they all like sushi. So I think it's really asking ourselves, why do they not want the other child doing it? Is it because they need their own certain attention with their parents? Is it because they need to be encouraged that they bring their own unique gifts to the family, like cartwheels in the background or whatever? Ethan's really good at distracting quietly. And so that's kind of where we've gone with it. I feel like I can't hold back another child. At the same time, when they make certain commitments to certain things, like they all made a commitment to do Taekwondo, or the second child really loves, like I said, he's physical, so he really loves Taekwondo. Then the older child started doing it, the younger children started doing it. The older child does not really love it so much, but we're like, you should stick with it because of this. Will he continue it the rest of his life? Probably not. But we think it's an important skill for him to know self-defense and to learn the mastery of his physical self when maybe that is a weakness for him. So where there's like a battle between them, I think in this situation, usually it's like the oldest gets to do this. I want to be like the oldest. But in this situation, it's the second child gets to do this. He's so much better than me, and I don't really like not being as good as him, you know? So there's different problems that come up, and you have to just explore that with the child, you know? Well, it doesn't matter if you're the best, or that's not what we're going for here. We're going for you to learn self-defense. We're going for your self-improvement on yourself. Not supporting each other. So it brings out other bigger problems, sometimes life problems that you can discuss to help make sure everybody's supported in whatever's going on.
But going back to the earlier question about how do you help a child who's stressed, right? We talked about you got to realize what we're really supposed to teach them. And in this instance of, you know, the oldest has something he's good at, but now the youngest wants to do it, that jealousy, it's teaching kids to recognize that their value to our family or to the world doesn't change because somebody is better at something that they're not interested in. It's good that we all have differences and that we're better at different things. And so as a parent, it's our responsibility to teach the kids, hey, your thing might be music and his thing might be Taekwondo, and that's good. That's okay. Let him teach you Taekwondo so that you can get better at it if you want. You teach him violin. Work together. Use your strengths to help each other. That's what we need to teach them, and allow those strengths to build everybody.
And I think the other battle that happens a lot in our family is now child 3 notice that dad eats sushi a lot on his own or sometimes with mom, so he wants to try it because he knows he'll get to spend time with dad. Now that's his connection to his dad. So it's in a bigger family. I'm not sure if it happens as much in a smaller family, but in a larger family, it's are they getting that time with mom and dad? Do they feel like my parents love me even if I don't love sushi? Am I getting time with my dad even if sushi is not so good? And they have tried it and they're like, this is not my thing. I'm like, that's okay. Your dad loves you, even if you don't love sushi. And you can find your own thing you love to do with your dad. Your dad loves you, even if you don't like to go deep sea fishing with him. You don't have to read a classic book to watch a movie with your dad. Just tell him, Dad, I need some time with you. So that's a battle that happens a lot in our family. It's really like them expressing, I would like individual attention, individual time with you. And we just have to be aware of their need for that.
You said you do the MBA, it's just a piece of paper. The network is what's valuable for the MBA. And I look at what you're doing, and this goes back to what I said earlier about me thinking long term. I imagine a group of kids that have gotten together on this app or whatever and become friends, and they know at this age that they have a friend whose passion is biology, or they have a friend whose passion is math and science, or music, or education, or psychology, or whatever. And you've become friends, and you've already started teaching each other what your passions are. And fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, when you're now in the workforce, you now have businesses, you're trying to solve the world's problems. And when you come up with a problem and it's in the field of biology, who are you going to call? You're going to call that friend from 10 years ago who was passionate about biology and who you've kept in touch with and is now an expert in biology. And you already know how to communicate with them. You already know how to let them teach you in a way that's useful. And I think that will be a very powerful thing in 15, 20 years. A great thing now, because it's going to allow you to learn better. A powerful thing in the future when you're making big decisions together.
I think it provides a vehicle. What is exciting to me about it is it provides a vehicle where children can pursue their individual interests. We talked about this idea of an I Wonder book, or the idea of how do we foster children's individual talents and interests. And that's exactly what this is doing. It's not just when I have 5 kids and we're already doing math and language, we're doing basic things. And then we're learning together in a one-room schoolhouse, kind of whatever subject I feel like our families need. It can be difficult to juggle all of that. So having just that platform that already exists that I can say, here's where you can take your wonder. Here's where you can produce something for your wonder. And that's exciting. I think Cadence has really enjoyed and just kind of, he's enjoyed that. And going back to homeschool, having social problems, or kids not being socially inept because they're homeschooled, this is another avenue for them to have social opportunities. When children are in elementary school age and they're younger, it's a little bit easier to find groups where they can interact with other children their same age. But as Cadence has gotten older, it's been harder to find that. For 11, 12, I talked to another homeschool mom who felt the same way. Wish that my kids had interaction with kids their age, but every time we go to homeschool groups or homeschool, it's usually younger elementary school kids. So this could be an avenue for middle school, for high school kids, for even upper elementary kids to have the opportunity to make friends in a positive learning environment, to share what they're excited about so they don't feel so isolated. So I really like that about it too. I think that could definitely serve our family.
Yeah. And a byproduct is they're learning how to communicate with each other in a way that's useful, in a way that teaches other people, that provides value to them, that reinforces the learning that they already have. And I imagine that you'll find not always younger, the older kids teaching the younger kids or teaching kids their own age, but you could come on a situation where a younger kid is now teaching a group of older kids because those older kids recognize that the younger kid is more passionate about the subject and has studied it more, and there's something that can be learned. And that is more indicative of a workforce type situation or an entrepreneur type situation where, I was going into companies at 25, 26, 27, early 20s, telling guys in their 50s how they should run their company. And if I didn't have the ability to communicate and didn't show that I was an expert in what I was saying, they'd have no reason to listen. And I love that this concept could teach those principles to kids in addition to math and science and biology?
One of those specific things needed in the workforce too is the ability to collaborate instead of be competitive, which is exciting about this. You don't have to, it's not like you're going to get an A over another person. You're going to get the highest grade in the class. The curve is based on you. It's not all competitive. The goal is to all learn together, to all be our unique selves, which is very different from, I think, even in general, the way a lot of our society thinks right now. We all have to kind of be the same. Or we have to, there's no differences at all. This celebrates differences and makes an opportunity like we've tried to create in our family where you're supporting people and learning from each other, supporting people in their talents and their skills, but also providing your own. And generally, I think the internet can be very consumerish. Here we are in like the adult ego state, just learning all the time. This kind of puts us in an opportunity to move ourselves out of that instead of just being, like you've said before, consumers, and be creators with what we're learning. And that's really, really exciting. That is more what will affect change. That is more what will affect jobs in the future, affect your career path in the future and your families in the future. To be somebody who's cooperative instead of competitive, to be somebody who affects change and is a creator to problems instead of being someone who's a consumer.
I know you said without adult supervision, but I think we'll be surprised how many adults will be more interested in what their kids are doing when they hear what's going on. I mean, this whole time Cadence was doing that blog thing with you, I was constantly at, Cadence, show me. What are you doing here? Well, how's it going? I want to see what you're doing because it's exciting to me, the things that he's learning. And I'm excited to have him show it to me. So I think you'll find that there'll be quite a bit of adult supervision as it's happening simply because parents will be interested.
We'll facilitate children even sharing more with their parents what they are learning and interested in than just wondering and kind of letting it pass by.
Okay, so does anyone else have anything they want to say? Okay.
I do actually. There's 4 principles that I wanted to take away from this. The first one is this idea of learning to create rather than just consume knowledge. Right? You're creating something that you're inspired by. And able to share that with others instead of just trying to, take all this knowledge and, shove it inside your head as quickly as possible. Another one is this idea of teaching to the tool, and how it's generally more effective to teach to a problem, right? So, maybe, Amy, you don't remember why you were learning biology when you were 8. Right, but I'm sure that Cadence knows why he learned how to unfreeze the freezer. There's very practical here. We need to solve problems, right? And so when we're constantly teaching to tools instead of teaching to problems, it can be very confusing to children because it's not evident why it is that they're doing what they're doing. Another one that you mentioned is this idea of using teaching as a tool for learning, which seems to be largely void in a traditional education system, but is coming up constantly in a really strong homeschooling environment where you're using that as just a whole other layer and perhaps arguably the most valuable layer of the education process because teaching is such a powerful way of learning. And then also there's a term that you use, I can't remember which of you said it, but this idea of life school. Like you call it homeschool, it should really be called life school, right? I love that.
Everything is an opportunity to learn.
Everything is learning, and learning applies to everything. Yeah.
So I might have to add that one because that's one that was not on my list of principles for the makeshift homeschool. I was trying to lay out stuff that the kids were telling me and figuring out.
Yeah, that was Amy. School is life and life is school. That's what she said. Yeah.
And that's really beautiful. So I just wanted to reiterate those before we go ahead and close it out. Oh, nice. There we go.
We've successfully seen all 5 of them now.
Thank you, Austin, Amy, for joining us on the Makeshift Homeschool Podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks
Thank you
for having
both.
us.
It was a joy.
Bye.
Bye.